Hey everybody, what's happening? I am Nolan Kelly here with Ben Rasa. We are doing our final division preview of the preseason. It has been a long ride. We've done 32 teams. How you feeling heading in with just under a week left until the season kicks off in Chicago next week?
It's insane. It's finally here. It's been a lot of prep, so I'm excited for it to get underway. And it's good. I feel like we did a lot of really solid work to at least lay the foundation for hopefully what's a good start to the season.
It's going to be a successful year. I can just feel it.
Yeah.
So we got so much on the site that you can check out. We've got season long projections if you haven't done your draft yet. We've got Awesemo's week one projections already out. We've got loads of articles, including a new article called the Awesemo Matchups column with Adam Pfeiffer. He's going to be breaking down every single game on the Sunday slate, which is going to be huge. So we've got a lot of stuff this season, but let's dive right into the NFC West, where we have the Arizona Cardinals, the LA Rams. I said LA, right? I called the San Diego Chargers, so
Yeah.
we
50.
got to get one of them right. The LA Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, and the San Francisco 49ers. Let's dig into the Arizona Cardinals, one of the more exciting teams, I think, this season. They had probably the most inept offense that we've seen in a very long time last year. They finished a full 700 yards behind 31st ranked Miami in total yardage. They fired Steve Wilkes, their head coach. They fired offensive coordinator Mike McCoy. They have brought in air raid specialist Cliff Kingsbury out of Texas Tech, and they are going to pair him with Kyler Murray, the first overall pick in the draft. What are your general takeaways from this team?
It's certainly exciting. Kingsbury's a guy at Texas Tech we saw time and time again. Defense wasn't important, but his offenses, he produced some big numbers. Now, will that translate to the NFL? I'm somewhat skeptical. And then you have Kyler Murray, who, they ditched Josh Rosen immediately, and he's the future. The offensive line needs to protect him. David Johnson needs a line to run. We saw that last year. Without that, it's not going to matter, but it should be a new exciting team to keep an eye on.
Well, let's take a little curveball and talk a little bit about this offensive line because it is a very bad offensive line. In fact, PFF had them ranked as the worst offensive line in football, I believe, or one of them in their rankings. They've added J.R. Sweezy, they've added Marcus Gilbert. That's going to be pretty much the key, I think, to whether or not this team can find success. If they can keep Kyler Murray upright and keep that pocket a little bit, then they might be able to improve just on the basis of their horrible standing last year. So I agree with you. I think that's a really good point, and it's going to be a key to getting David Johnson going. So Kyler Murray, let's talk a little bit about Kyler Murray because he basically matched Baker Mayfield in stats last year. He's the Heisman winner. He matched him in stats and passing stats, but added an extra 700 yards rushing. Are you buying him at his current ADP, which is going around quarterback 12? He seems to be falling a little bit after he got off to a rough start in the preseason.
Not for me. In season long, maybe in best ball, in DFS, because when you have the ability to run like him, there's going to be some games where he just breaks one off and it's a massive weak output. But for the course of the season, I'm not sure that this team, maybe they're building towards something, but I think more often than not, he's going to struggle and they're still going to struggle despite Kingsbury bringing in what is an exciting offense. There's no doubt.
It is going to be exciting offense. It's going to be paced up. I'm kind of viewing him in that group of quarterbacks. Earlier on in the best ball season, he was going really high, like right after Aaron Rodgers, and I wasn't taking him there. And now he's kind of back into the group of the Cam Newtons and the Russell Wilsons and that sort of group. And I think he's fine in there. He's going to give you a kind of Lamar Jackson style upside with his rushing ability, and he's going to provide you with some really big weeks, I think, on the season. So I love him in best ball, and I think he's a risky player with some high upside in your season long drafts as well. This is an intriguing wide receiver group. We've got Christian Kirk, who had a pretty decent, respectable 43,593 line in 12 games last year and has apparently been the best receiver in camp. We have ageless wonder Larry Fitzgerald coming back. He had a down year with only 700 yards receiving, but of course this offense was so bad and so slow that probably was the major factor in why he downgraded his offensive production. As well, we've got Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, Keshawn Johnson, who's turned heads. What are you liking about this group?
You bring up a point there with, you look last year and it doesn't scream excitement, but you have to keep in mind how bad the offense was. So you're not going to see numbers that match up across the league. So guys like Kirk, certainly interesting. Fitz does his thing, but I worry about the ceiling more often than not. Still holds some value here and there. I have to give a quick shout out to Andy Isabella. He's a UMass guy. We don't get many guys. Speedball seems very interesting. Now, can he immediately contribute? I'm not sure in a major way, but he's going to be a gadget guy that they'll definitely try to get him the ball. I just worry from a volume standpoint, who's secure outside of a guy like Kirk?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think those two are going to start. It's going to be Fitzgerald and Kirk. Keaton Butler's injured to start the season. Andy Isabella everyone was expecting him to take that role, but he hasn't really stepped up to the plate. And it looks like Keyshawn Johnson, their sixth round pick, might end up taking the role in three wide receiver sets. So that'll be interesting to see. Let's move on to running back. David Johnson was the greatest beneficiary of Mike McCoy's firing last year. They were pounding him in between the tackles at a 60% rate for 3.2 yards per carry under McCoy. Not great. I think he's a big bounce back candidate. I think most of fantasy football is in that as well. He's going as the fifth ADP player in almost every draft.
I have no problem with him. Again, it's a situation where you mentioned that the offensive line has been revamped. It can't be any worse than last year, and I would hope that Kingsbury's smart enough to use this guy in space. I was shocked at the lack of creativity, getting him the ball, not just on the ground, get him some easy catches, and that boosts the floor across the board. It's always fantasy gold when you're getting those easy dump offs.
Yep, absolutely. So that's it's really just a choice between whether or not you want to go with David Johnson or whether or not you want to take one of these other wide receivers like Devontae Adams or maybe Ezekiel Elliott's right there. Finally, let's wrap things up with the tight end. Ricky Seals-Jones is listed as third on the depth chart right now with Max Williams and Charles Clay moving on up. Do you have any interest in any of this as like even as a deep flyer or a two tight end league or a last tight end pick in a best ball or NFL DFS? Any interest at all?
I don't think so, to be honest. There's just so many tight ends across the league that you can fit into those last rounds that I just don't know why I would go here as opposed to some of the other situations with maybe a little more upside.
All right, that wraps it up. You got any final thoughts on the Cardinals, Ben?
No, I think that even though they'll be better, they're probably destined for the basement of the NFC West.
I totally agree with you. I think another 5-6 win season is in the cards. But let's move on to the Rams here. As far as the polar opposites of the Cardinals, pretty much they've got very, very similar coaching staff and personnel that they are going to bring back this season. Almost won the Super Bowl last year. They run 11 personnel, the highest rate in the NFL, which means you're going to get a lot of Robert Woods, a lot of Brandon Cooks, and a lot of Cooper Kupp or Josh Reynolds if one of those guys is injured. As well, we've got a lot of play action. 30% of their plays last year were on play action. That's referred to as a cheat code by most insiders. So I like this offense a lot. What are your general thoughts on them?
Absolutely. I mean, Sean McVay is certainly an innovator, and he puts Goff in great situations. He has all the weapons you need. You've got Gurley. They added Darrell Henderson, who everyone is very high on. It's really, again, not to say the same thing, they've lost some pieces on the offensive line, and that's the one scenario where I think the Rams could struggle is if that doesn't come together or they really have lack of depth if someone goes down. But if that doesn't happen, I think they're destined for another big season on offense.
And again, straight to the offensive line. This is one team that's going to rely heavily on two rookie starters. It looks like in their interior. Fortunately, they do have one of the best tackle combos in the NFL in Havenstein and Whitworth, so they're going to have some continuity there. But that's a big ask, asking two rookies to step in and take over the 2/3 of the interior of your offensive line. So that's my main concern for this team as well. How about these wide receivers? What are you doing with Woods, Cooks, Kupp? Do you have any strong thoughts on who should go where and whether or not you like Cooks or Woods more?
It's a decision you're weighing in season long, in DFS week to week. I tend to say that, Brandon Cooks, he's more of a, high risk, lower floor because of his targets are a little more, aggressive. I think he's poised for a big year, and I find him maybe falling in some drafts that I've done. So I've looked at him, Kupp being back, I think actually is a plus for all the receivers. It really just makes them that much more dynamic on offense, and there's plenty of volume to go around. So a guy like Brandon Cooks, even though the targets, a lot are over the top, I think he's poised for another big season.
I do too. I'm interested in all these guys. They are falling a little bit. You can grab them in best balls and pair them up with Jared Goff You can draft Josh Reynolds as a kind of like a handcuff, because if one of them gets injured, he's immediately going to get a 95% snap rate, which I kind of like. So I've been targeting him a lot in the last round of best balls. And quietly, Cooper Kupp had the second most fantasy points among wide receivers before he got injured last year. I think it was in week 5. So he's a sneaky pick as well. He's going as the third of those receivers, about 15 to 20 picks later. So I don't mind him as well. Are you in on Jared Goff if you're in on all these receivers as well?
QB is so deep that I don't think you don't need to reach for him. I think that's clear, but I have no problem. I'm more of a Goff fan than most, and I think that regardless of what you feel about him, he's put in situations that he can succeed in, and that's because of the coaching staff and the weapons around him. But the production is the production, so I have no problem using him in these formats.
What are you doing with Todd Gurley? Are you taking him? It looks like he's moving up a little bit. He's got the arthritic knee. There have been rumors that Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown will be taking over some of those snaps. Are you going to take him at his current ADP as he's moving up into the range of the top of the second round or bottom of the first round, or are you fading?
I'm mostly letting other people, I don't want to say chase it, because he could pay major dividends. This is a guy that we know how good he is. I just found myself taking more, I think, safer, higher floor guys in that spot, and he has trended upward a bit. If he slips, we've talked about this as we've done our drafts, and you should check out the videos on them. They've been really fun to do. It's not about the player, it's about where you're drafting them. Everyone's draftable at a certain point. And Gurley is another guy that, later in the second round, I would be clearly looking for him. But as he trends upward, I'm passing more often than not.
That's what I'm doing too. If he's going in that second round range, I would much rather have one of these wide receivers. Give me Juju Smith-Schuster or Tyreek Hill or Odell Beckham Jr. over Gurley, just because of the risk there. Though, he's a league winner if he ends up returning to form, or if the thoughts over his arthritic knee have been overblown, then he's got a chance at becoming a top 5 back. So that's a high risk, high reward pick, and I don't have any problem with it. But as he moves up, I'm on the same boat as you. I'd rather fade. What about tight end? You got any Gerald Everett love?
I don't. I know this offense is extremely dynamic. This is a situation though where I worry a little about one ball to go around. There's so many with Kupp back, the stable of backs. I'm not sure that Everett week in, week out gets enough touches. Talented guy, but just not for me.
I'm of the same opinion as you. I think there's just not enough ball to go around, though I do think he's a pretty talented player. So I'm kind of interested to see how he ends up faring this season. Maybe he can force a few more looks this way if he can get open. Let's move on to my San Francisco 49ers. Jimmy G is back. Tevin Coleman in. They've improved their defense a lot. We've still got Nick Mullins just in case things go wrong. What are your general thoughts on the 49ers this year, Ben?
So if it feels like the Niners have been waiting, to take the next step and they get derailed, obviously Jimmy G goes down, and this should be it in terms of some people really think they can challenge the Rams, and they certainly should be able to challenge the Seahawks. And if that happens, you have to assume that it's Garoppolo being efficient, Kittel doing his thing, and then one of these receivers stepping up. Debo Samuels, a guy out of South Carolina that I've had my eye on. I think he's going to be really good. Where his role is on this team, I think that's to be determined and does give me some concern. But there's plenty of weapons here. And besides Kittel, I don't think that much of the production is that secure.
Yes, that's kind of where I'm at too. As I was writing this team up, I was like, well, where's this other than Kittel, where's the ball going?
Yep.
Well, they're going to run the ball a lot. They run 2 running back sets, and they have 2 running backs in the field more than any other team in the league. And they run it at a really high rate. So I'm bullish on Coleman, and I'm bullish on Breda with McKinnon out, and I'm a little bit skeptical of these wide receivers. As far as the wide receivers go, I think I'm also a little bit skeptical about Jimmy Garoppolo. If you extrapolate his 12 full games with the 49ers over a full season, he's kind of in that 15 to 20 quarterback range, which is about where he's going. Are you getting much of him in your drafts?
I'm not. I'm in line with you that I just don't really – I think there's more questions than people make it out. Coming from New England, we could do a whole show just on that. But I just think that with the unknowns, they want to control the ball. And Tevin Coleman is a guy that's a good point by you. He, from Atlanta, I could see him thriving in this spot. So Kittel, we know what he's going to bring you. He's going very high, as he should. But other than that, it's very up for grabs.
Yep, and this wide receiver core, you touched on it a little bit. Kendrick Bourne led this team in targets among wide receivers last year with 60. Dante Pettis was a sleeper early on in best ball drafts in June and July. He's starting to dip now that he's in the doghouse. Kyle Shanahan saying that he needs to earn his role with the first team. We don't know if this is a motivational tactic or if he's actually going to be with the second team, and he's been surpassed by Debo Samuel and Marquise Goodwin. We also have Jalen Hurd in the mix for catches. One guy I'm a little bit interested in is Marquise Goodwin. He had a really strong 2017 with Garoppolo throwing him the ball. Injury plagued last year. He has the speed. He's going to have some big games this year, I think, if he's healthy. Are you still buying the fact that he might be able to return to his potential of the previous year?
You hope he can, because he needs his speed. That's really his key asset. He has world class speed. He's not just fast. And when you have that ability, yeah, track star style, best ball, things like ceiling games are always there. Now, week in and week out, I don't know if I trust this passing attack as a whole. So he's definitely gonna have some really ugly games in there. But if he has the speed, you can always look to a guy like that late in rounds for home run upside.
Yeah, that's why I like him in NFL, in DFS, and in best ball, because you don't have to choose who you're starting. If you're starting him in a week, like that's a really risky proposition in season long. So I'm not super high on him there. Finally, let's wrap things up with George Kittle. He's been getting a little bit of criticism lately. I've heard a lot of experts say they don't want to take him at his current ADP. He had 1,400 yards receiving and 88 receptions this year. He also ranked first among tight ends in yards per route run, first in catch after reception. Sorry, yards after catch after reception, and first in avoided tackles. Am I wrong in thinking that these experts are wrong? Because I'm okay taking him around the turn if I got like one of the top running backs in the second or third round.
I'm with you. He just seems the floor is one of the safest out there, and for this team to have any success, it has to go through Kittle. We just talked about, yeah, there's some nice pieces, but there's more questions than answers. It feels like no matter what the game plan is each week, it has to revolve around him. Garoppolo being there should provide stability at the QB position, and that can only help him. So I have no problem, obviously Kelsey. There's some other premier tight ends across the league, but Kittle is in that conversation.
All right, let's move on. Seattle Seahawks, final team. I'm going to rely heavily on you for this one, Ben, as I am just about halfway through my final write-up, which will be posted later today. What are your general thoughts on the Seahawks' chances on this run-heavy offense led by Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer?
Oh boy, here we go again with me and the Seahawks. I said this last year, and I was just flat out wrong. They made the playoffs, gave Dallas a hell of a game. I think that they take a step back. They just have a lot of inexperience. The defense is not what it once was. And you mentioned, yes, they want to control time of possession with Carson and Penny, but they are putting a ton of pressure on Tyler Lockett on the outside. Doug Baldwin not there. DJ Metcalf, talented, but obviously an unknown. David Moore, the tight end position doesn't scream, massive production. So it's just a lot to ask of Russell Wilson in the running game. And I do think in a competitive division, they might struggle.
Yeah, this wide receiver group is interesting because DK Metcalf is out to start with an injury, it looks like. You have Jaron Brown possibly taking on a role, and David Moore is injured as well. So I don't know who's getting the ball here, but it probably doesn't matter because they pass so much, or because, sorry, they run so much.
It's a situation that I think they can get by, at home against inferior opponents. That narrative is going to work. I just wonder when they get in games against teams like the Rams and other high octane offenses, if they start trailing and the game plan, sometimes you obviously have to adapt. I just wonder how Wilson is going to be able to do that. He always holds the ball out. He takes a lot of sacks. He was fantastic last year, but it's just a lot of pressure on him and Lockett to kind of carry this team when the game falls behind, because Carson and Penny aren't going to be able to give you that much when you really need quick scores.
Are you taking Wilson in this kind of range with all these other quarterbacks? Or it always feels to me like when I'm drafting Wilson, it's like, oh, he's the last one of this kind of mid-tier quarterback one group left. And I'd begrudgingly take him, even though I've seen some buzz that he actually might be undervalued at this point.
I do see that side of it, that, his abilities, and he really has been kind of not willing to rush as much, and that would open up, certainly unlock a lot of his potential, and I get why they want to keep him upright. Honestly, it's not a guy that I'm looking to take. If he falls in certain spots, you can look at them, but there are just other QBs that, you mentioned guys like Lamar Jackson, other guys with some more upside, even Josh Allen, erratic type players that Wilson is great, but from a fantasy perspective in a slow moving offense like this, I'm not sure how high, even if you get it right, your return on that investment would be.
Yep, I think you're right. He's kind of like this last resort of sort of top tier guys that might crack into the QB1 ranks. So I never feel good about taking him. Chris Carson's been rising up the ranks lately as people have realized that he is pretty much the lead back, and this is probably not going to be a timeshare. You used to be able to get him in like the mid 50s in best ball. Now he's moved up to the 30s. Where are you drafting him?
It's a guy that not going to give you much in the passing game, and I do worry about Penny taking a timeshare type role. So as he continues to trend upward, I have limited exposure to him in season long. It's a team that I'm really shorting in all things. I like the under on their win total, and I didn't find myself getting to a lot of guys in season long. DK Metcalf is someone long term I think has a ton of upside, but as you mentioned, he's already injured. That's not an ideal way to start the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm shorting a lot of these guys too. But the one guy I was taking early on is Carson. Now that he's up in that 30 range, I have no interest. And I've actually ended up taking Mike Penny a lot because he's a nice handcuff. If anything happens to Carson, he's going to take over the running back one role, and he still is probably going to get you like 500 yards on the ground. So he's got some safety there, a little bit of a floor. Let's finish things off with tight end here. Any Will Dissly love?
No, I do think that he can have as I mentioned, behind Lockett, it's open season. So I wouldn't be stunned to see him have a role within the offense, but just too many questions and too many other flyer tight ends that were more of a priority for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's an intriguing late round pick in best ball if you miss out on all the other tight ends, but that's about it. There's no real reason to draft him for any other reason than that. So that wraps up all of our team previews and the NFC West. Ben, thanks so much for joining me. This has been a fun process. If you haven't had a chance to look at all the stuff we've got out at Osmo.com, please do. We've got team previews for every single team in the NFL. We've got season-long rankings. We've got our Week 1 projections for DraftKings and FanDuel already out. We got NFL preseason content out right now. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching, and we will see you throughout the season.